Hello, my name is Stephanie Thomas, and I'm here today with Mike Haberman, co-founder of Omega HR Solutions, to answer your questions from our latest webinar, 5 Performance Management Scenarios, Navigating Everyday Encounters for Greater Results. Take it away, Mike.
All right, Stephanie, we've got a good number of questions here that I'm going to try to get through as many as I can in this short period of time we've got. The first question is, when you have these conversations with an employee, should you have another manager or supervisor present? I have had issues where individuals stated that they did not know certain things after it had been explained to them. Certainly, if you are going to be threatening disciplinary action, suspension, termination, those kinds of things, you need to have another supervisor available or another manager available that can attest to what was said in the meeting. If you're having, it's the first time meeting you're talking about, and you're basically giving a verbal warning to somebody to improve their performance, in that first meeting it's not quite so necessary to have that person available. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that in each of those situations you are documenting what was said. And with this particular employee, if they are continually saying, I didn't understand that, then what you do is you go sit right there, you write out what was said, and then you have them sign what was said, so that way you get rid of that problem with them coming back and saying, I didn't understand. So if they're not comfortable doing that, you're not comfortable doing that, then yeah, go ahead and have another supervisor available, but it's not necessary all the time. Next question is, how can you determine what is the amount of proper training? Well, that's certainly going to depend upon the task that they are performing, the quality of the work that they're putting out. There are some assessments that you can use to determine whether somebody has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do what it is that they are supposed to be doing. You've got the benchmarks that have perhaps been set by other employees in that job and people that you have perhaps considered to be successful incumbents in that position that you can now measure this other person's performance with. And if they are below that performance level, then it may be that you need additional training. Once you give them that additional training, if they are not improving, then it's not the training, it's them, and at that point you have a different decision that you have to make about whether they're going to continue to work for you or not. What can an HR director do with a supervisor that hands in performance reviews that come in with all perfect scores even though you know the employee is not a perfect employee? Well, one of the things that I have always complained about is supervisors that do poor performance evaluation, that should show up on their performance evaluation. And if you're not the one that's doing that performance evaluation of that supervisor, then you need to go to that supervisor's manager and explain to them that that employee is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's obvious that they are just filling out the form and they are making a mockery of the process, and then tell that manager that that person's use of performance evaluation should show up on their performance evaluation as well. There's got to be consequences to not doing the process appropriately, and you're just going to have to work with your management team and determine what those appropriate processes are and what those consequences are. Next question is, do you recommend that employees do self-evaluations each year? I have always been a fan of self-evaluations. I know some people hate them, and some of the employees that have to fill them out hate them because they know that the supervisor that they have is not going to listen to them and not going to pay attention to them. And if indeed you're one of those supervisors that doesn't really pay attention to what they say and that person filling that form out has no meaning, then in that case I would recommend that they not do it. I always liked it with my employees because I found that it was a conversation starter. And sometimes I found something out from them about what they said that I was not aware of, and so it really helped me reevaluate what I was doing. If you also can discover whether somebody has an inflated opinion of themselves, and at that point you know that you need to work on bringing them down to reality. But I think it's a good idea, and I think it works well as a conversation starter for that evaluation. Remember, I said these need to be conversations, and so use something to get them started. Next question is, do you recommend using a separation agreement with each termination or just a termination letter? That's one of those situations where it just depends. If you've got somebody that is, you've got a lot of non-disclosure agreements with, you've got somebody that has the potential for impacting your organization, or you feel that they are going to potentially threaten your organization with a lawsuit, then certainly a separation agreement where they promise not to do that in return for a severance is a good thing to do. In other cases where you don't fear any of that stuff, a termination letter is appropriate. And sometimes you've got just a good employee who's leaving, and they're leaving for a better opportunity. They're not threatening the organization at all. And in that particular case, why raise the issue of the fact that we may have discriminated the issue in 22 different laws? So don't bring that up. But if you feel that somebody has that potential for suing you, then you certainly want to get them to sign a separation agreement. Next question is, when there are attendance policy violations, do you recommend suspending before termination, or does that defeat the purpose? Again, that's one of those where it depends. You're going to have to do a read on the particular individual. In some cases, it is appropriate to go right to termination. In other cases, if you feel that the person is just not really awakened, but you think that they might, then in that particular case, you may want to do a suspension. But you're right, suspending somebody else, somebody that doesn't want to be at work, is just giving them another vacation. So if that's the way you feel about them, then that suspension may not be appropriate. Next question is, we are small, less than 10 employees, and when we have issues, we tend to lay off to avoid the hassle of termination procedures. How risky is that from a legal standpoint? Well, it is indeed risky. Layoff is a term that comes from a lot of union activity that implies that there is a potential callback, that there is an opportunity to come back and get their job back. And if you're not providing that, then don't use the term layoff. If you're terminating somebody, terminate somebody, and be honest with them why you are terminating them. Going through the hassle of the termination procedure of going, I don't know what procedure you have. It doesn't have to be that complicated, but certainly saying to somebody that you are terminating them because of their poor performance and you have documentation of that poor performance, then you want to go ahead and say, that's what we're terminating you for. Because what happens is on an unemployment, you laid them off, and now they go and say, well, in reality, they fired me. The unemployment office comes back to you and says, no, this employee was laid off. You go, well, really, they were terminated. You're already caught in a lie. So why do you want to start lying to the government when in reality you're letting these people go? So be honest with them. You're going to be better for it. They're going to be better for it. And quit using that term layoff if indeed there's no opportunity for them to come back to work. And then lastly, the last question is, if an employee disagrees with a candid assessment with management examples and requests to include a counterstatement of explanation, is this acceptable in my opinion? It is. That's a company procedure thing. I've seen that work for some companies and not work for other companies. I personally don't. If you set it up correctly and you allow them to have access, or there is room on your form for them to make a comment, then certainly I would allow them to make that comment. And if indeed they are bringing up stuff in their explanation that is not verified by the documentation that you had in preparation for that assessment, then Maybe you need to rethink your assessment. Maybe they're bringing up stuff that is cogent to the argument that they should not have been evaluated that way. If they just want to put down that everybody's a jerk and nobody likes me and they're doing the conspiracy stuff, at least you've allowed them the opportunity to make that comment. Make them feel better. It really, in reality, has no basis or bearing on the actual performance review that you give them. So, Stephanie, that's the sum total of the questions that we had there that were relevant to what we talked about. And with that, I'll hand it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Mike, for answering these additional questions from our webinar attendees. And I encourage everyone to visit complyright.com to see the webinar in its full length. For further engagement, you may reach out to Mike Haberman at mhaberman@omegaHRsolutions.com. And to learn more about ComplyRight, visit complyright.com. Thank you, everyone.